introduce Dr. Mallowa. Thank you so much for being interested and taking your time this morning to share with us on technology-driven cassava disease management in Africa. And we're really excited to hear what you have to say. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And so my presentation today, I'd just like to highlight a couple of research that is going on in Africa that's really showing promise to manage different diseases and how cassava is grown and produced in Africa. So that is what I would like to highlight. And first, I would like to state that the presentations that I'm going to make are not my own work. They are the work of brilliant collaborative teams that are working in Africa. And so from my time working on the crop, I happen to know about this project and I'm excited about them. And so I just want to start by saying a very big thank you to all the researchers who have allowed me to be able to use their work and to who have given me their slides and explained to me their experiments so I can make this presentation. I'm really, really honored and proud of them. And so I'd like to thank Chidozie Egesi from NEXTGEN Collaborative Project, Laura Boykin of the Cassava Virus Action Project, Lava Kumar of International Institute of Tropical Agriculture, David Hughes and James Legg of the Penn State and IITA, Elizabeth Gikobo of Hogo Foods, and Polar of Agribus Bio. So I just thank them so much for allowing me to talk about them and talk about their work. So usually when we hear the narrative that is coming out of Africa, it's usually talking about, we see death scenes. And this was in 2019, way before COVID. There was a serious famine in northern Kenya, in Turkana, and people were dying. So those are the stories that we see. And we see celebrities. This is a Kenyan celebrity. Her name is Akodhe. We see her coming through for the people, going, fund drives, food security. And so those are the narratives that usually come out. And that was even before we had COVID. And so now the narratives that we begin to see are things like these. A couple of weeks ago, we saw that there was a stampede in one of the Kenyan slums because there was a surge for people trying to get food aid. There was police, there was tear gas. The situation was a little serious. Or others, everybody is talking about, so what's going to happen beyond COVID-19 or right now, later in the year, where these things could happen. So one of the things is that those narratives are sad and serious, but they are not the only narratives that are coming out of Africa. We have a lot of positive stories and we have a lot of potential to do something about it. And so as researchers in plant science, in agriculture, we have a lot of potential to make a difference in terms of having an impact in food security beyond this time. And especially because it's the International Year of Plant Health, not just of COVID, then we can continue to bring that narrative and say, we want to change the narrative for Africa and even globally with what we have to say. So usually we want the narrative to be talking about good stories, about how we can have an impact, how children can be well fed. That is the story, that is the narrative we would like to talk about and we would like to push. So cassava is a crop that I am passionate about. I spent about the last 20 years in cassava research, teaching, and talking about cassava on different platforms. And so it's a crop that I truly believe in. Originally from Central America, it's been in Africa for a number of years. There's several countries that are powerhouses where this crop is a staple, and these include Nigeria, Mozambique, DRC, Ghana, Angola, and those are countries where it's a big staple. It's something that there is in their diet every day. And even with Nigeria's neighbors, right? Cassava is still an important crop in those places. In much of East Africa, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, cassava is still important, but it is not a staple. It is like in some communities it is, but it's not a staple for everybody every day. In those communities it is, but it is balanced with maize or corn, with bananas, with millet, and with some other kinds of foods, as we well know. So when we look at the production chart, here we see 0 being where cassava is not grown at all. The dark green is where we have a lot of production. And so we can see, again, those countries we have just mentioned in Nigeria, we can see around here in East and Central Africa, we can see there are pockets where cassava is very, very important, especially here in Uganda. And this second map shows us some key staples. It's a harvest pass map, some key staples, and we have the blue star for banana, the orange one, orange circle for sweet potato, blue circle for maize, and then the orange triangle for cassava. And we can see what we just mentioned about in Kenya and in parts of East Africa, we have all those things going, but in some places we just have cassava being more, even more important. But it has been a very important food security crop for many of those places, especially places where they have war, like the DRC. It's the kind of crop that takes 18 to 24 months to grow. So it's there in the field, and you can harvest it either whole, you take out your whole farm and then you make it into flour, or you can take piecemeal and you just take what you need. And then for many communities that do not have refrigeration, that do not have a way to store this food, there are small farming communities that don't have granaries, then this is very, very important in terms of it's their food security crop. So now when we begin to talk about food security, you have this crop that you can keep for 18 to 24 months. If you're told to stay at home and self-quarantine, then at least something is happening in your field. You have something. And a lot of the farmers, especially the small scale ones, have this relay system going in their farms where they have all ages of the crop. Every time they harvest, then they're planting back in. And so each time they have access to that. So when something happens like these cassava viral diseases that I just wanted to mention, then that just destroys their food security. And this is a crop that has so much potential. It is already serving a very huge role. So there's several viral diseases. There is cassava brown streak disease, which affects the leaves as well as the tubers. It makes the tubers develop these brown streaks in them, and they begin to rot, and they're not able to be cooked or used. And that's by far right now one of the ones that we are really talking about. It is especially in East and Central Africa, spread to more than 17 countries in little pockets here and there right now, but it is not yet in West Africa where the big powerhouses for cassava consumption are. Then we also have cassava mosaic disease, and the disease symptoms are similar to the ones for cassava virus disease, but then for this one, you have more mottling and carving of the leaves. They don't look quite as straight. So you have a slightly different symptoms, but to the untrained eye, it just looks like these are yellow things on your leaves, right? And even for experts, differentiating between cassava mosaic disease and cassava brown streak disease presents a challenge if it's not something that you're trying to do all the time. So cassava brown streak disease is relatively new. In the last maybe 20 years, it's become a bigger problem than it was before, whereas cassava mosaic disease we've been talking about for the last 100 years. It's been there, it's been endemic, but you still get some yield there. And there's been a lot of work for the cassava mosaic disease and resistant varieties. So a lot has happened for this particular crop as well. So we have the first one was cassava brown streak disease. The second one is cassava mosaic disease. And then we can see the symptoms there. And then there is green mite. And so because people are used to having cassava mosaic disease, when the new diseases came, they are not as familiar. And then they think they're still going to get a yield the way they do with cassava mosaic. And then come harvest time, there's nothing. So there's been several new and old tools and lots of partners doing amazing work. There is a Plant Village Nuru, which is a phone-based app that is used for cassava disease diagnostics. There is a Tree Lab, which is nanopore sequencing that is being used to get diagnosis so that they can sequence and know exactly which strain of viruses are there, and they can advise farmers. And this is the potential has already been shown, it's being demonstrated. Then there is the Cassava Seed Tracker, which is also a web-based app that puts all this together, where you have communities of farmers who are producing the material and people who need the material, and it's linking them up together. And if they need resources from extension, then you can have that linked up. So that's a fast for Africa. There is NEXTGEN Cassava, which is working on the breeding aspect of things, and it's having us a three-pronged approach that includes doing surveys, doing research, and then doing the breeding itself on a very, very high scale. Then there is Cassava Plus, which is using transformation tools, and it's using gene editing more recently with Vaca Plus cassava, and producing hardier cassava, or cassava that has a virus resistance that has been produced through transformation. And then there is just who is going to be using these tools, and that's something that I am, especially as a researcher, as an educator, very interested in and very passionate about, including the youth and taking it stream so that they are also involved and are aware that these things even exist. So we will start by talking about a Plant Village Nuru. So like I said, it is a phone app. And for those of us who are in Africa or based in Africa right now, we would testify to how the phone really changed our lives. I think the research says that prior to the 1990s, there was 2% of people in Africa that had a phone, that old type phone that you called hello. There's just 2% of people in Africa that had it, right? And 60% of America at that time already had landlines in their house. They could call their bank, they could call their hospital, they could call their extension person. So there is that disparity. But now in 2020, we can say that 60% of Africa has access to a mobile phone. They might not necessarily own the mobile phone themselves, but they know a friend or a child or a parent, somebody in their family that has the mobile phone that they can have access to. So with Plant Village Nuru, it is an AI tool that is used that you can use your phone to then detect the symptoms on the plant and use it for diagnostics. So Nuru is a Swahili word that means light, and so that the farmers can have it to solve their problems. So we mentioned how that those diseases that are there on the farm, there's a problem with diagnostics because you don't have the experts. And in the villages, you don't have access to knowing, how will I know this is brown streak and this is the green mite and this is the cassava mosaic disease? When I'm in the village by myself, the extensionist is not there. Maybe my group leader who was trained is not there with me. Then now I have this app that can help me. And so it is, you can download the app from what is called the Play Store, or if you have an iPhone. And it is, even if you have a simple, as long as you have a smartphone, you're able to use it. And so it gives you feedback in real time, and it helps you to, it has the major diseases, and it helps you to recognize the symptoms. It will tell you this is this, and then it will give you advice on management. Like, is this something that you need to pull out? Is this something that you need to now look for somebody to help you. And so it gives you that option. And then it also connects you with the experts of the disease in your area, so that the disease that has been recognized. So Penn State are the leaders who are the leading partners in developing this database, and it's piloted already in several countries, in Tanzania, in Kenya, in bits and pieces in Nigeria. So once you have where you have you have your plant that is diseased, and then the plant village Nuru is going to detect the disease. It gives you a number. This number here, it's telling you what percentage, like 84% of that leaf is affected, or 85%, and then it tells you what disease it is. If there's brown streak, or if it was mosaic disease, it tells you what percent, and then once you have it there, then it gives you suggestions for what to do. So if you go to the Play Store and you're trying to find it, this is what you would be looking for. You would be looking for Plant Village Nuru. And it's beyond cassava. There is other crops that are on there that they can use the same tools to work for, and focusing even for things like locusts or stuff like that. But we are specifically interested in this as for working for cassava disease management. And so once you install the program, so you have the program, you install the program, then you decide which of these things you want to do, whether you want it to help you with diagnosis and for which crop, whether you want to check the information that they have, whether you want to send your image to an actual person, to an expert. So there is volunteers as well as people that are working that want to be experts that can be linked to that, and then whether you want to ask a question. So we would specifically be here with the Cassava AI, where that's where you would be going to. And then Nuru would tell you, I'm Nuru and I want to help you identify your disease, and you choose whether you want to go ahead and do that and use it for diagnosis. Then it'll differentiate for you, healthy plants or diseased plants, and which disease, and then give you advice about it. And so that has been used, and several teams in Africa, including the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture, several of the national programs have been involved as well, Self-Help Africa and several other programs, in actually training the farmers, which I think is a very beautiful thing, that we now have this tool in the hands of growers, and growers are street smart. If this is going to work, then they will tell each other and it passes on. And there's lots of YouTube videos that I was watching as I was preparing for this, where you see the farmers talking to each other. This is a specialist in the middle, but these are growers, and they are very interested because this is something that they can do for themselves. So it is something that is already there, and it is already with the farmers. And for that, something like that to be happening in Africa, so that people have access to diagnosis that would be from an expert, is just mind-blowing. And they have put thousands of images to train the machine, so that the learning environment for the machine is fairly decent and accurate. I think is a very beautiful thing. The second project that I had mentioned was Tree Lab, which was portable genomics. So the people who are in genomics, the experts, I'm sure you know how sequencing is not, it's not something that is with everybody that we can say, oh, I'm a scientist, I can sequence, right? It's something that is fairly, 20, 30 years for Africa that we have been talking about sequencing. We have been running into potential problems with how you get the equipment there. The equipment is big and bulky. Even doing PCR in the fields and collect samples and getting your extract and bringing back to the lab has been a problem. And so now we have even gone a step higher. Now we are doing sequencing. But this team, the Cassava Virus Action Project, they have been working to try to reduce this whole sequencing project from the long process that it is, where you have your samples, you collect them, you send them out for sequencing, you wait for months to get back the results, and then you say, okay, this cassava disease on this particular farm is this particular strain of the virus, and this is what we are going to do. By which time, if it was something where you were trying to solve a disease problem for a farmer, then 6 months, if it was going to be a problem, it already is, and it's already a very big problem. So that was trying to cut down that time with this advanced technology. So it is in several locations, and they are collecting samples from the leaf, from the stem, and even from the fly itself, so that they can be able to use those samples for diagnostics. You will excuse my babies crying upstairs. That is what happens when you're giving a seminar and you have babies, but such is life. And then you have DNA extraction. So you do the extraction, and then the incubation unit that they're using is actually using batteries, and it's operated by an app that's on a phone. So that is fairly, advanced, because this is specifically targeting the environment that is present in Africa for you to be able to have things like this. So you don't have the whole big machine that uses a lot of power and equipment. And then the sequencing kit that they're using, the main ion on the main IT to analyze, is very small. If I pronounce it wrongly, remember, I'm not an expert on this, but I am excited about it, right? And then they do their analysis, and then they do their sequencing. So they have these three things. They have one where they're going to the main ion kit where they will do their sequencing. They have a power bank, and then their analysis is done here. And because the equipment is small and they've figured out a way to do it, they are literally, I think I'll share the slides with Lisa at the end, but this video just presents, it's about a short video, 8-minute video, the actual details of how they do it, and in the lab, collect their equipment and go. And so they are going to the field, and this is Laura Boykin, and she's been in East Africa. She was based in Australia until fairly recently. Some of the people in Australia might know about her. And these are teams of researchers from East Africa, from Tanzania, from Uganda, and from Kenya, and from Australia. So it's a global team, and they are working with farmers, and they literally do their analysis, their sequencing, genomics, under a tree. They figured out how to keep their samples cold, how to keep their enzymes and extract reagents cold, and bring the experts and the teams. And the growers are really, really excited about it. This is Mama Maina, and she's a cassava farmer in Kenya. And so they visited with her, they did the diagnostics, they gave advice, provided resistant material, which is the frontline management tool for right now as we figure out other things. And so they come back and check in a year with their, how are things going, and getting more. And it's just been very, very, very effective. And I think this is, the potential for this is a game changer. If we were able to take this type of technology coming from, from the cassava field, and then use it. I'm sure other people are using it in other crops, but if we could do this on a wide scale in Africa, this is the kind of thing that we are wanting to see, so that it won't be that it has to go to Nairobi or to Joburg or to Jerusalem, to the big labs where you have, the big institutions. If you can have your researchers go out there and do sequencing for farmers, so the farmers have the answers that they need, which is why we do what we do, that would just be phenomenal. And another thing that team has been doing is capacity building, going to different cities and teaching people about the whole nanopore technology, how the equipment works, how it can be used. So people who already have a little information and are interested, or students potentially, usually sign up for these nanopore safaris. I saw one in Sierra Leone, and then there was this other one in Kinshasa, and they have some others planned. And then they learn about how they can use this and how they can incorporate it into their work as diagnostic tools and stuff like that. So just even building the capacity. So that has been really, really good. Yes, sorry, parenting calls. Here, mommy is doing something. Tell Egan to help you. Sorry about that. Yes, and then and so that really has potential. Then the next thing that we have is the cassava seed tracker. So what the seed tracker is, it's an app that integrates the seed production people, the seed certification people, and the market, so that producers can meet their potential. So we've already mentioned how the village Nuru or the portable tree genomics is telling you this is the problem that you have. But then it would be even better once you realize that this is the problem that you have, then now you need to get something different. If you were tied into the market, right? If you knew where you could get, okay, all my cassava is sick and I won't have food for the next, the next season, or I won't have food security, then now I'm linked up to where I can get better seed production, seed certification, and market access. So the people who are producing seed in bulk are able to get certified. The people who need the seed are able to find them and get the seed to them. If for some reason it turns out that this seed is sick, then you have a tracking system where you can figure out, okay, this here, there, this is where the potential problems are. So it's an all-in-one package that is telling you the varieties that are being grown and who has it, so the people who have it, and then it integrates the government system at the point where they will certify this seed production certification. So if you think about cassava being a vegetative crop, we don't have a seed system formal the way we had one for corn or for other, like actual seed systems. So this is something that is fairly new, and it's just really, really special and innovative that you would be able to collect this in Africa, to have this information, and then to have tracking. Now you have a support system and you have a knowledge bank, and you can come back to this. So it is still in the pilot stages, but it's just really, really cool. And you have GPS, and you can locate where were all those fields where the materials were gotten for, so you can track it, back. So how this works is that you have the producer, and this is the information that you have about the producer. This is the variety that they have. This is when it will be available. This is when you can pick it up. And this example that I am showing you here is from Tanzania. And so they have the Tanzania Seed Certification Institute has worked very closely with the International Institute for Tropical Agriculture to roll this out. And so the inspectors then verify, they inspect the seeds, they make sure that everything is okay, and they help us to build an inventory. This is what now exists. This is what is present. So once you have the seed database and the producers database together, then now you have information for the traders. The traders know this is where you can go to get this, and this is if and when you need it. And then this is fairly new for the cassava farmers, but then it gives motivation or incentive for farmers to produce on such a scale, so that they know they can be thecertified, they can make money for it, so they can go beyond the small scale farming to even bigger farming. So there's several things that have been piloted for this. They've done seed certification, which didn't exist before for cassava systems. So this is new, and other government programs are national research programs looking into how they can also adapt this. Developing digital forms. You know how tedious it is to fill many forms, but this is the kind of thing where you fill your forms on location and you put it into the system and it's there. And it reduces the amount of paperwork. There is also the whole thing of building capacity, which is what we need to do a lot of. So building capacity for how to use computers, the digital system, all of those, and training staff. And so this is like the places where they have farmers in Tanzania having that. And James Legg, who is one of the leaders of this program in the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture, he just recently did a podcast about it, and he was talking about how they are connecting their farmers to the farmers who have problems to the farmers who are producing, and where the farmers who are producing are. And so the information will tell you in the different places what varieties are being grown there. So on the left, we have location, the regions, and then on the right, we have the varieties. So region, group by variety, you can figure out if I'm in this region, maybe these are the varieties that are available and I can get them cheaper than if I go for the variety I really want, which is in another region, and putting in transport costs. So it allows farmers to be able to make informed decisions about it. So really, really neat program and really good use of technology to be able to bring rural farmers, you know, into a market that would not exist for them otherwise. And then the traders have this information and they know where the different materials went. So if you want now to buy right now downstream, if it's not just seed, but even downstream, then you can tap into those networks. NEXTGEN cassava, we talked about, this is a big cassava build project that is building capacity, 7 countries, 3 continents, and they like we said, you know, they have the research arm, they have surveys, and then they have a breeding arm. So they're doing breeding and research and surveys to see how gender and diversity issues build into this. They look at shortening the breeding cycle for cassava. Breeding new varieties takes a long time, so shortening that cycle, building infrastructure and capacity for the breeders in Africa, and germplasm exchange, especially now with the diseases that we mentioned. So it's a fairly big team. They have a lot of diversity in terms of racial diversity, age diversity, bringing together women and men, older scientists and younger scientists, and they've just done a phenomenal job. Some of their main impacts that they have had include reducing, you know, using the breeding tools and research to reduce the time from 8 to 10 years for breeding to get a new variety to 5 to 6 years. So that's a big one. And doing genomic selection. So they have models that will allow them to select for the specific varieties that they want. They gave the first complete cassava reference genome came from this team, and other people can now tap into that genome. And they have a cassava base, which is an open access database that everybody puts their information into, their phenotypic information, all the genotypes that they have in there, and other people can tap into it for information about that, which makes the breeding so much better for everyone because it's an open access database. And initially for these teams, this was the BTI, I think, at Cornell. Let me give you the accurate name for that one. Yeah, the Boyce Thompson Institute. And so initially they wanted people to learn about how to develop and maintain, and then be able to do those in Africa in their own countries. And they have really benefited a lot from the partnerships, they themselves giving to that, but even us as the African partners learning about how to use that data and how to access the information and use it effectively. So that's been a really, really good thing that this base even exists and people have access to it. Being able to induce more and earlier flowering in cassava. I think this was done in CIAT in collaboration with a team from Cornell that reduces the flowering time. So you induce flowering sooner, and so you reduce that time, and it allows you to make a lot of progress in terms of developing new varieties. So that's been really, really good too. So then the last group is the VACA, virus-resistant cassava for Africa Plus. And so they have two-pronged approach. They have we want to have disease resistant and stack that with nutritionally enhanced cassava. It's also big multi-institutional teams, 4 different countries, about 9 institutions. And this is one that is using genetic engineering tools. People have their own feelings about genetic engineering, but this is one where you are looking at national programs and programs that will benefit rural farmers. So we are not talking about things that are for sale, but just the things that we have learned in terms of being biotechnology champions, informing people about the tools that exist and how they work, physical infrastructure development as well, and just building a lot of capacity, training students, training the researchers, lab workers about how to work with this technology. And this program has been around for a while. And in terms of proof of concept, do the children who even eat cassava have these nutritional deficiencies that we think that they have? And how can we show it, and involving people in doing that, and involving the communities as well? There was a time when all the systems that existed for genetic engineering were just for corn. And so beginning to develop systems for cassava and saying these protocols are not going to work. If you have cassava and you're going to destroy the field at the end of it, involving genetic modification, you cannot do it the same way that you would do with corn, because then you have all this this big crop, this huge thing, and it's wet, and you're trying to burn it the way you do corn, and it just doesn't work the same way. It'll be out there for weeks. So a learning process and getting good protocols for how you can do confined field trials of cassava in Africa. I think now we have things going in Uganda, things going in Kenya, in Nigeria, and initial steps in Ghana. So several countries that have protocols that know how they can conduct this experiment safely while they're still at experimental stage, and building capacity for different people, going to different shows and being a source of information, because this is a crop people are familiar with in the communities where you're going. So when you talk about this is the problem, this is the disease, and people are familiar with the disease, and now we are going to do this so that the disease that it doesn't exist, it becomes easier to explain even when you go to the shows exactly how this virus resistant and nutritional enhanced cassava works, even if it is using genetic engineering. And so that just becomes easier. It provides a platform for explanation, and having the community buy in. This is one of the communities that I personally was working with many years ago. And these mothers were so, they were so passionate about where is this cassava that you're saying is going to yield better and won't have disease, and they were excited to participate. And so as scientists, you feel the need to deliver. How can you not deliver to people who believe in your potential? And I have left the project, many of us have left the project now, but we're still so passionate about, we need to get a product, even if it's not for these children. Surely by the time these children are mothers, then we should have a product to deliver. And so just having the community buy in, the local leaders being part of helping you to have those proof of concepts, you can do that. And one of the interesting things that the VACA experiments are doing right now is gene editing. So like in Uganda, they've done piloting experiments in the US with Ugandan students, and then even in Uganda itself, just starting to know what are the genes for cassava brown streak virus resistance or silencing. And once you know the genes, how can you use gene editing to produce better material that you can use to fight this disease? So it's still baby steps, still very new, but that you can have that potential, that you can have these experiments going on in labs, in partner labs in the US and in Uganda, or in greenhouses experiments in Uganda, I think is a very, very good initial step that has a lot of potential to solve this. I mean, gene editing has done a lot in other fields. And so all these projects that I have talked about, one of the big things that we have seen is that it is collaborative, it is multi-institutional, it is across continents. So for us to move forward and be effective with CASSAVA, we will have to do this across continents, and it will need to be have collaborative platforms like Global CASSAVA Partnership for the 21st century, partnerships that are global. All these things we have mentioned, you cannot do it by yourself. You cannot do it in one country because you can't have all these systems going in all these countries at the same time. We just aren't there yet. But if you work collaboratively and you work together, then these people already have the system in that country, then you can trickle down and find ways for that partnership to happen. You can include the youth. And in terms of including the youth, you can train them for entrepreneurship. And you can also train them to accept these technologies, because the youth are super good. You know, the young people are the ones who know what's going on with the phones, what's going on with apps, what's going on in the labs. So training the young people across the board as entrepreneurs and even as researchers is going to yield in big time. So there is this young woman, Elizabeth. She was training to become business and IT, and then her family was already doing business, and she got training. That wasn't her main training. She was already in business and IT, but then she became a producer of CASSAVA. And I think she's about 29 years old when we email back and forth. And she's producing, she has a little factory plant in Nairobi, Kenya, that is doing very effectively, and a small baking shop, and just taking cassava from being poor man's crop in the village to being something that all these people with gluten-free allergies can use and have. And this other lady, Rafaela, she went to Brazil for training, came back to Benin with her training, got a small plot, got herself on the farm. And when I met her, she was like winning awards in terms of being a young entrepreneur, having an impact, training other people, producing material, and just being somebody that you can look up to and say, you know, we can actually do something with this. So there is a lot already going on, but just a few illustrations of how young people are transforming, and there is lots and lots of stories of them using this. IITA has a program for the youth in Nigeria, looking to expand and train the youth in that. We had a school program that we were piloting in Kenya, in my village, because I'm excited about cassava and I think they should. And this is in the villages. We are in cassava farming, cassava land, and some of these programs are already working like with Self-Help Africa. And so those farmers, let's buy the material from them, get the material to the schools with the students, get the students interested, tell them, you know, this is your cassava plant, let's go out there, let's go plant it. And it's nothing like mechanized farming. It's the kids out there digging or having the oxen and just getting it to work, and them seeing that this is their farm, their thing, they can, and how it can be done, and then finally getting them to harvest, and all along explaining these things that are happening, or these are the diseases that you have, you know, you can use this app. And if nothing else, even if they never become agriculture people, that they have this information, you know, and it's there in their villages and in their communities, going to give it a big impact. Or having the university students visit the institutions. This happened in Uganda. Visit the institutions and see what is going on there, and have the information that these are all the things that you can do potentially, is very good. And so, yeah, thank you so much for listening to me, and I will take any questions you have. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Sally. This was so exciting, and seeing your passion really gives us all a new inspiration, because we can see that, you know, plant pathology is so much more than just plant pathology. So thank you so much for sharing that. I would like to start with the questions. So the first question is regarding the seed tracker tool. How sure are we that the tracking of seeds will certainly prevent the disease from happening? In other terms, can a disease develop other than from the seeds that are affected?
Very, very good question. So we do know that the disease develops from planting diseased material, one, and then also the white fly. There's a white fly that, you know, spreads the disease from farm to farm. So yes, there is that you will have, beyond just having the infected material, you will have transmission from the white flies. But one of the things is that in other systems, not the cassava system, we have seen the benefit of having a tracking system, of knowing where your material is, of knowing where the material is infected. Because if you can track and say, this particular farm in this part of Tanzania has a problem, then you can tell that farm, we need to stop production, you know, or change. And then you can at least fix some of the holes. It won't be perfect, but you can at least stop some of those. I believe that it's going to improve drastically how this thing is done, because we don't know. You don't know who has what where, you know, given the way we do our farming in Africa. This gives us, it's a pilot, yes, but it gives us potential to know. You can know which varieties are grown. So if a variety is going down, then it's there in your system, and then you can say, okay, this one is not working, you know, and let's change it to this one. And you have the partnership with the government, with the growers, and with the traders. Everybody wants this to work. So if a variety is not working, then the system will be like, let's get this out, but people you have an access to where to get more.
Thank you. Follow-up question is, in the case that there could be a risk that a seed certification would slow down the cultivation or food production, eventually leading to the lower quantity being produced or more expensive cassava food products, is that something that's also been looked at with the tracking?
Is the question asking whether the tracking is going to drive up the prices?
Yeah, so I think what they're asking is, what is the risk that, you know, having the seed certification process, you know, can that slow down food production systems at all, or does the digitizing of this system and the tracking thereof enable a faster line?
Okay, I get what you mean. So I think that yes, it would drive up prices, you know, but driving up the prices a little bit would be a good thing for the growers who are involved, you know. Yes, you pay for the certification, but you also get value for your money, because it takes cassava from being just your little crop to now having producers, seed producers for cassava, who you can call up the way you call maize, you know, maize seed producers, that I need seed, you know, for NGOs needing seed, for counties needing seed. They can go to these particular farmers who have been certified to get those seeds. Right now, you get seed from your neighbor and your friend and from the market. You don't know what you found in the market. You don't know that it's clean material. You come plant it, and 6 months later you have disease. But this way, with a certification system, it would allow you to do that. So this is initial stages. It's a pilot, you know, so we're not saying that it's already everywhere, but I feel like, especially for the seed producers, they will get money, good money for it, but also downstream, you will get better seeds, and everybody wants good seeds.
I'm glad to see that the producers are willing to make the investment, because that is what the seed tracker is. It is an investment in the production system. A follow-up question is, which improvements in the percentage terms in cassava disease reduction or prevention, when these measures have been put in place, is seen in the different areas?
So the question is asking how much reduction in the amount of disease we've seen when we have all these things. A lot of these technologies, and the reason we're excited about them is that they are new, right? And so when I showed you the initial maps, I showed you like all these countries where cassava is grown, but each of these projects I've said, this is in 4 countries, this is in 3 countries, this is in 7 countries. It's just in a few countries. So a lot of them haven't scaled up, like to be whole country. For example, the Plant Village Neuro, It's in a lot of Western Kenya, but it's in pockets of Western Kenya. Not each and everybody already has access to it, but you can already see in the communities where it is used, there has been, what will I say, increase in terms of you go from having your whole field destroyed to having interventions early enough that you're not having a problem. So the numbers that are there are very good numbers, but they're numbers that are for pockets. You know, if you do your tree genomics in this village in Tanzania and you work with 100 farmers, it is just those 100 farmers. But the farmers growing cassava in Tanzania are thousands. So in the pilots, it has been very, very successful. The numbers are very high, but it's in the pilots and it hasn't scaled up to the whole countries. And so like Seed Tracker is with 400 farmers in Tanzania. So we don't know what it's going to look like when it's whole country. But in the small, the potential is really, really good.
I'm really glad to hear that. And I think the question asker says, thank you very much for taking the time. So how strict are the regulations on genetic editing and GMO and open field use in Africa?
Oh, very strict. So these are at the experimental stage. And I remember a number of years ago, we were working with the regulators. I'm from Kenya, and this was one of the initial pilots for cassava, genetically engineered cassava for virus resistance. And one of the questions the regulators had for us was, you can't get people to go in a roundabout, you know, like get the traffic people to go around the roundabout if there is no policeman, and you're telling me you're going to have, you know, genetic engineered cassava in the field with the farmers. So in terms of regulation, I think the governments have been very, very, very cautious, sometimes to the frustration of scientists, but the governments have been cautious. And so we have cotton, but nobody eats cotton, and cotton is in the fields. And we are making we have BT corn. We're making slow progress, but there is progress nonetheless. But for crops like cassava right now, the reason there is a lot of potential here is, one, it's not a seed company. They're not trying to make money. There is nothing else, you know, and there is nothing else that will take as short of a time and be as efficient. And my personal take is, if we are letting the research continue, you know, and then we do this research, all the students and researchers who have put in time and investment for years into building a product, then down the road say, oh no, we're not going to release it, is like, why did you allow the research to continue if you never had the intention of releasing the products when the products are finally ready? But I like that they are being cautious, you know, and it's taking a long time, because so that when you do have a product and you release it into the market, then you have a product that is you've tested and you've taken your time with.
Yes, I think it is something that needs care from both the government side, but also from a research side. Of the same opinion that you are. It seems that you're very passionate about young people and getting them on board with the different programs. And we're living in the era of information and data exchange. What is the perception of many of these countries or the programs you're working with open access and data and having exchange that's freely available, accessible to all the parties?
One of the things that we are seeing, especially with the young people in the universities, several platforms online, is that people are very vibrant and excited to have access to this information. Especially one of the good side effects of COVID-19 was all these colleges saying, you can do this program for free, you can have access to our journals, you can have, and the young people are very excited and getting onto that. But the other thing we have to know is that if your intervention is at university level, you know, if you come and find, you know, 20-year-old me 20 years ago, or you go, you know, the intervention is too high because you already got through high school and you're already in the university. And so you are gonna make it no matter what and have access to all these things. But the lower level in the village schools, they have no idea what you're talking about, you know. when I was an undergraduate, somehow got through my undergraduate, come from my village is where they grow cassava. And I had no idea that the disease was existing. You know, I just went and visited my grandmother. You eat cassava, didn't know the research existed, didn't know what was going on. So even the students who are in the village, in that very village where this research is happening, sometimes are oblivious to the research happening unless you go out there. You know, if I went and you go and everybody who is doing research goes and tells them about their little piece, you know, I work on cassava, you work on banana, everybody goes back, then the information is there. So that these students then become inspired. If they stay in the village and become farmers, they will use your tools. If they go to the university and become extension workers, they use your tools. If they go even higher and become the researchers, they'll use your tools. If they become the village chief, they'll know that research exists. And so it's a win-win for everybody. So I think the students are very excited, but there is a big disparities between cities and villages. And the cities are in the first world and they're in the university and they're just like anywhere else. And the villages sometimes, you know, need us to have responsibility and to go back and share that information and bring them with us, because they're the ones who will change the villages. They've lived there. They're the ones who are going to bring that change to their communities.
Yes, I believe in the grassroots, and I think that's where the change can also happen, really inspiring our young people to get involved and to empower them to see what it really is to be a plant pathologist. So thank you very much, Dr. Sally. Do you have any last minute comments? I'm going to wrap the session up for this afternoon or this morning.
I would say thank you so much to everybody who's taken time to listen to me. And my last minute comment is, be the change you want to see. As this is the International Year of Plant Health for us as plant pathologists in our communities. Let's go back to our city schools, to our village schools, to our communities, find out more, like beyond my own personal research. What is happening in my research field? Support those scientists, tell their stories, so that when research wins, all of us win.
Agreed. So thank you very much, Dr. Sally. Next week, we will have, on the 11th of May, we'll have Dr. Luigi Faino from the University of Rome giving his OPP seminar on the evolution of mini chromosomes in Fusarium. I've uploaded the links. I see I have one last question. Oh no, thanks. We really appreciate it, Elisa. So thank you everybody for attending today. You can contact OPP through the Slack channel if you want to carry on chatting with Dr. Sally. So thank you so much, Dr. Sally. Have a wonderful morning further.
Thanks. Lisa, please send me the Slack thing again on my email so I can get on there.
Perfect. I'll do that. So I'll be sending the Slack channel to you. I also like to let everyone that's watching know that these slides will be put onto the Open Science Framework. So Dr. Sally, you can forward those to me as well, and we'll have that up that they can be citable with a DOI attached to each of them. So thank you everybody once again, and we'll see you on the 11th.
Okay, thanks. Thank you so much,
Bye.
everyone.